Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hi, I'm Flight Lieutenant Chris Solly. Welcome to the latest RAF Inside Air podcast. In this episode, we'll be meeting some of the team behind the Royal Air Force Families Federation, some of those who benefited from their work, and we'll be reminding ourselves that, despite the name, the RAF Families Federation isn't just there for families. If you're serving, they're there for you too.
Perhaps questioning whether a policy is correct and should be challenged because it may not be fit for purpose anymore, and we're one of those vehicles that personnel can use to do that.
So that's a major outcome for that individual. Fortunately for him, BMW agreed for him to take his car with him, so he's happy.
No, I'd have given up. I'm not going to lie. I would have given up. Ken was just as incensed as I was, and he was like, "No, this isn't right. This isn't right. We're going to fight this," and that's exactly what we did.
As usual, we'll also reheat a few stories which might have slipped under your radar. But first, let's see if you can identify what this noise is. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. The Royal Air Force Families Federation can help both families and single serving personnel with a huge range of issues, from housing in the block, quarters or hirings, to healthcare, finance, deployment and employment, to education and life overseas. They're there to help and support. Maria Lyle is the Federation Director, and she started by telling me just what the role of the RAF Families Federation actually is.
So our role is to support serving personnel and their families wherever they are around the world. The aim is to improve their quality of life, whether that's at home or at work. So as you can imagine, that covers, Chris, a really wide range of issues. So in a nutshell, we try and help people wherever they may be.
And what's the background? Where did the RAF Families Federation spring from?
Okay, so the RAF Families Federation came about around about 2007, 2008. Some people listening might have been serving back then, absolutely. And there was an organisation called Airwaves that had a publication on behalf of families and pushed information out to families. And what became clear was there was a feeling that a little bit more was needed, and that an independent voice. So an organisation that wasn't part of the chain of command, wasn't led by serving people. So people felt comfortable going to them for confidentiality purposes, and that could then influence on their behalf, whether that was within the RAF or with external bodies. And the Army already had one of those, the Army Families Federation. And about the same time, the Naval Families Federation was also stood up.
You're based in Lincolnshire. Is the entire team based there with you, or are you spread across the globe?
So we're quite widespread. We don't have anyone actually working for us overseas at the moment, but we live across a range of RAF bases. It probably won't surprise people to know. We have offices at RAF Wittering who very kindly, quick shout out to RAF Wittering, put us up for free in some converted SFA. So we encounter some of the challenges occasionally around boilers and smoke alarms that SFAs bring, but we're mostly very comfortable there. And we've got team members working out of Benton and Leeming, for example. And we work in a hybrid way. So we're in those offices together a number of times a week, but many of us also do some work from home. And in fact, that's where I am today.
OK, Maria, let's address an elephant in the room. The organisation is the RAF Families Federation. That could lead some people to thinking that you're there for families. You're not there for serving personnel, but that's not the case, is it?
It's not, no, and people will probably think, well, why are you called that then? And I have been around that loop with the RAF senior leadership team to take their thoughts on that. They've decided that changing our name would mean that perhaps it might confuse families. So we're sticking with it at the moment. But yeah, key takeaway, we are here for serving personnel as well as families. And in fact, about 50% of the issues that are raised with each year do come from serving personnel, but we still encounter people who think, oh, well, I'm not married or I don't have children, therefore I can't take my issue to the RAF FamFed. But absolutely you can, and please do if you're thinking about it.
I suspect the answer to this is a bit like the question of how long is a piece of string, but what sort of things do people come to you with typically?
Yeah, you're right. It is a wide range. People probably won't be surprised with the number one, which is accommodation. So, and I say accommodation rather than SFA because, of course, it could be people's single living accommodation. It could be service family accommodation. And people generally come for two broad reasons. The first is they're not getting things done in their house that they should have. So, the standard of maintenance is not what it should be, and that could cover a variety of things. And we've had, sadly, a growth in that, a huge growth in the last 6 months. There's been an impact in the contract changeover, and that's led to more issues for families. And the other area for accommodation is what people are entitled to. What are the rules and regulations? Am I able to get a quarter in a certain place? Or if I'm not married, sometimes it's because the policy is, some might say, outdated. So they come to us to see what wriggle room there might be. Could we support them in getting access to a particular service or location? And we'll do our level best to help. We've got 2 people whose main focus is accommodation and are very experienced and have lots of contacts within DIO, MOD, and the contractors to try and move things forward. Apart from accommodation, education, healthcare, people moving and accessing healthcare services as they move. We also deal with people overseas getting in contact with a range of services and allowances and trying to understand how they're going to be supported when they move out and back. That's a big one as well. And lastly, again, this for the serving personnel, a range of questions around, I would say, eligibility and entitlement. So perhaps questioning whether a policy is correct and should be challenged because it may not be fit for purpose anymore, and we're one of those vehicles that personnel can use to do that.
We've got an Air Force now which encourages people to question things and to sort of dig a bit deeper. Presumably the RAF Families Federation has a huge part to play in that process.
Yeah, Chris, that's a key part of our role, really. We do that on behalf of people. So some people will absolutely feel empowered to do that themselves. And that's great. That's how things should be. Occasionally, for a variety of reasons, they may not wish to, or they may not feel comfortable doing so. And so our role is to take that forward. And we do that for individuals. If it's a one-off question or problem they're coming to us with, we'll work on them one-to-one with the team, and on a bigger scale. So when it's clear that there is something happening that is having a significant impact for a number of people, our role is to take that to policymakers within MOD, to NHS trusts or local authorities, and to the House of Commons Defence Select Committee, for example, that I present to on a couple of occasions a year, or the Minister for Defence Personnel and Veterans, and explain why it's an issue using the evidence that we gather. It doesn't always, so those big picture conversations don't always bear fruit straight away. It may take years in some cases for things to change, but some of the changes that we've seen recently to a more, I would argue, equal and fair workforce for the RAF is because of bodies like the RAF Families Federation and others, but we're not claiming sole ownership there, pushing for change.
It sounds like the RAF Families Federation has certainly got some clout when it comes to influencing both inside and outside from what you're saying then.
Absolutely, yes. We are generally able to get hold of the right people to talk to about problems. And mostly that's, as I say, for individuals. So to help individuals find what it is they need. So an example of that this week is around knowing who to go to in an NHS trust when a military spouse is being posted with her husband but might have to pay all her maternity pay back because it means she can't return to her work within that NHS trust. Now, ideally, given that they've signed the Armed Forces Covenant, if we can have a conversation with the Armed Forces champion within that trust, it's quite possible that we may be able to have that decision overturned, and we have done in the past. So that sort of reach into different organisations via our networks within the NHS is it's sort of played out in a number of fields as well.
It sounds from what you're saying like you really enjoy, and the team really enjoy the work you're doing. You feel like you're making a difference. Does that come from a personal background for you within the forces?
Yes. So I'm trying to sort of count heads here. I think I'm I want to say third director of the Families Federation since it was set up, and all of us are ex-serving. So I'm a bit more unusual in that the other two, I think, was a more standard retiring from the military as a sort of group captain or air commodore and moved in. But I served in the RAF. I left about 16, 17 years ago and went into the private sector. But it's great to come back into this world and see some people I haven't seen for a long time, get acquainted with a new set of acronyms. My husband's still serving, so we're still very much a military family. And the Families Federation team, there if I include all, and there's about 15, 16 strong, and 3 or 4 of those people have no military connection and do it as subject matter experts, and the rest have either served themselves or have been or are in military families. So the team is, I think, well set up in terms of lived experience, but also in having the relevant expertise to help families. And we need a balance of both.
And I think that makes a heck of a difference if you're coming to see somebody to feel they've got empathy and understand where you're coming from is such an important thing. You've mentioned a couple of times that it's not just the UK that you cover. Where else do you operate, and what's the best way for people to contact you?
We do cover worldwide, and we try and get out to see people in those destinations where we can. But as you can imagine, the travel budgets, as they are for most of the public and charitable sector, aren't limitless. So we do a range of visits to see people, and we always try and publicise those visits when they're happening. But obviously, for most people, if they've got an issue, it's not going to coincide with a visit. So if they go online to our website, which I think is the second thing that comes up when you do a Google search, they will see there's a report an issue button on that website, and they can click that regardless of where they are and put in what it is that's concerning them. I'm going to Cyprus next month, and in April we've got a team member going out to Shape in Belgium, but we've been out to the States within the last year, and Italy, Gibraltar. So we try and make sure that we're getting to places where there's concentrations of RAF personnel. But I'm very conscious that actually some of the problems people encounter are often when they're more isolated and they're not in an area where there's other personnel around them. So those people I would encourage absolutely to raise their issues with us, and we'll do our level best to support them.
You mentioned contacting you. It could be somebody listening to this in the Falklands or Falkirk for that to that extent. So is the website the easiest way to make that initial approach?
It absolutely is, yes. Our telephone number is on the website, and people are welcome to ring. We're open office hours. But in terms of the quickest route in, that we've designed our website so when you enter your details in there, it goes straight into our database, and it allows us to then have your information on our behalf confidentially to start looking at your case and working with you. So that's what I'd encourage people to do if at all possible.
And just finally, to wrap that side of things up, what would your advice be if somebody's listening to this at the moment thinking, it's probably not a problem the RAF Families Federation can help with? What would you say to them?
Just get in touch. We really don't mind what the issue is. And I don't want to overpromise. I'm not saying we can wave a magic wand for every single issue, for every single person out there. We're very good at signposting. So if we are not actually the right people to give you the best service for that, we know who is. So we work with all sorts of people. Another example there might be someone coming to us with quite a detailed benefits issue. Am I eligible to claim X benefits? Or, so for that, we would either draw upon the RAF Benevolent Fund benefit advisor, who we work with closely, who is detailed and qualified in that, or we'd use one of the Department of Work and Pensions Armed Forces Covenant advisors that we work with. So we do have pretty good coverage, and if we're not the experts, because we don't claim to be absolutely omnipotent, we'll hopefully find you the person who is.
Alexandra Stokes is the Policy Advisor for Education and Childcare at the RAF Families Federation, otherwise known as Ali, but Alexandra is your full name. Are you okay if we use Ali for the purpose of this interview?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant stuff. Ali, tell me about your role. What does it actually mean? What do you actually do?
It's quite a varied role, really. We support service personnel and families with inquiries. If they've got any questions or concerns, they can come to us at the RAF Families Federation. And I specifically will be working with the inquiries that are to do with education and childcare. And from these inquiries, we can collect evidence to advocate for the RAF community and work to drive change and influence policies to support the RAF community.
And what are the key areas? What do you sort of do on a practical basis to help people when they come to you?
So some of the things we might do is share information and guidance with service personnel and families. This could be highlighting policies, JSPs, so joint service publications. It might be that we signpost people to the RAF Families Federation website where we've got lots of information, or it could be helping with individual cases, depending on what people need.
Education, childcare are sort of difficult, contentious issues sometimes if you're based in the UK and your whole life is here. Once you throw into the mix people getting posted overseas, sometimes short notice, presumably that brings problems and opportunities of its own.
Yeah, there can be potential challenges for families that are relocating, and we try and share information to make sure that families can make informed decisions so they know what, for example, if they're going overseas, what provision is available overseas. There's information on the overseas section of our website for things to consider when you're going overseas. We might also signpost families to other organisations that have got specialists. So, for example, there's in Defence Children's Services, there's the Education Advisory Team that can support with inquiries relating to the UK. And there's also the Overseas Education Supportability Team that can support families if you're considering going overseas. They can help you with that, give you lots of information and guidance to support you to make decisions that are right for you.
I'm guessing this is the how long is a piece of string question, but what sort of issues do people come to you with?
Could be all sorts of different things. People might come to us to ask about service pupil premium, things like eligibility, if their children may be entitled to it, and also what schools can do with it. And there are different guides that some local authorities have produced, for example. There's information on the government website to support with that. They might come to us if they're encountering challenges accessing childcare, or if the cost of childcare has gone up and they've got concerns about that. And then we can signpost information to them to help them with that. So, for example, we might share information about tax-free childcare and government-funded hours, or highlight the Discover My Benefits website to families so they can find out more about the wraparound childcare scheme. We can also support with things like school admissions. If families are moving to a different area of England, or devolved administrations are overseas and they want information on the application process, they can contact us and we'll share information with them to support them with that process.
So it's a really wide-ranging sort of support package you can offer people. Presumably, if somebody's listening to this now and thinking, well, it's just something the RAF Families Federation probably aren't going to be able to help with this, what would you say to them?
Get in touch. If you've got any questions, concerns, get in touch with us and we can share information with you. Or, if we can't support you with the matter, then we hopefully will be able to signpost to somebody else, another organisation or charity that may be able to support with it. We work closely with the other families federations. So if you're hearing this from a different service, then you're welcome to get in touch with us and we can signpost you to them if appropriate.
Ali, one of the things I've heard about is the SKIP Alliance. I don't know what it is. What the heck is that?
So SKIP stands for Service Children's Progression Alliance, and it's a network bringing together practitioners, researchers, policymakers and funders to develop support to enable service children to thrive in education. And they've developed some resources, one of which was recently launched was the Thriving Lives Toolkit. There's now a digital version of that available, and that's a self-evaluation tool for schools to use to consider the support they offer to service children. And it's available on the SKIP Alliance website. And it's got information about things like transitions to help schools to consider supporting children as they're moving into and out of their settings. And there's lots of really useful information on there. It's evidence-based, it's been researched, so a really useful tool to support schools.
And one of the other things I've heard about is the month of the military child. Again, just give us some info on that.
Absolutely. So Month of the Military Child, as far as I'm aware, initially started out in the US, and then it came over to the UK, and in Wales they've been celebrating it for a couple of years. The MOD got on board last year, and it was more widely recognised in the UK. And it's about raising awareness and developing understanding of the unique circumstances service families may encounter, so that schools and childcare providers can have an understanding, so they know what service children may need support. We realise that everybody's different, so the support that they may need will vary and their experiences will vary, and also it's an opportunity to celebrate their experiences and diversity.
And the Month of the Military Child happens in April. There'll be an article in the spring edition of Envoy and more online at the RAF Families Federation website and social media. Time now to meet somebody who's benefited directly from the services offered by the RAF Families Federation. Nikki was on a posting to America, but the fun and games started when they returned to the UK. Nikki, you and your husband got a posting to California. Fantastic stuff. What was that posting like, first of all?
Oh yeah, it was absolutely amazing. Opportunity of a lifetime.
Being America, though, things are a little bit different from the start. You only get a limited amount of time to make sure you're registered and you've done all the admin stuff, don't you?
Oh yeah, it is a bit of an admin nightmare, I'm not going to lie.
But you then had a brilliant 4-year tour in California at Edwards Air Force Base. Then you came back to the UK, and that's when the issues started. What was it, sort of the basis of the problem?
Oh yeah, it was definitely back to down to earth with a bump. Basically we moved back. I wanted to find myself a job. I hadn't worked while we were in America due to green cards, visa, just logistics really. So I thought, right, okay, I've been told previously that I could claim job seekers, so that's what I attempted to do. That's
when the issues really began, though, because whilst you were in America, you had been paying, or the money had been paid into your Class 1 national insurance contributions, hadn't they? So it shouldn't have been a problem.
Yes, they had. Yeah, I had. Before I moved back, I made sure I claimed for my Class 1 contributions, just because that's what happens, because you get deployed with your spouse, and it just safeguards yourself for your pension and everything else that you need for later on in life. So I've done exactly what I needed to do.
So as far as you're concerned, you come back to the UK, you can now pick up, you'll be able to claim your job seekers allowance, and everything should be good. But that's not how it worked, is it?
Oh no. That'd be way too easy, wouldn't it? No, what happened was I attempted to claim job seekers. I was told, no, you're not entitled to this. And I was like, oh, that's a bit strange. So I contacted Ken at the Families Federation, who also reiterated, oh yes, you are entitled to this. So I reapplied. Same thing again, got a letter back, no, you can't have this. So yeah, it was the start of a 4-month journey.
Now, many people at that point, without support, probably would have just gone, it's more trouble than it's worth, I'm going to give up. But you didn't do that, and you got the support from the RAF Families Federation. It was Ken that was working with you. What happened next?
Yep, well, Ken picked up my case. First of all, I contacted the champion in my area, the Armed Forces champion. We're lucky we have one in Telford, which is very close to where I live. And from what I can gather, they gave him all the information and said, what I need to do, and I had to go for a mandatory reconsideration. So I filled out all the paperwork for that, and it came back, you're not entitled.
There's a pattern here.
Yeah.
So Ken isn't going to give up, you're not going to give up, what then?
So I'd contacted HMRC. They'd said that my national insurance contributions hadn't been updated. So Ken then contacted them on my behalf and managed to get an urgent referral. So that got sorted out within 48 hours. So then, this was 6 months down the line from me actually putting the paperwork in for that. There was a massive backlog at the HMRC, which hadn't helped my case. So I put in my mandatory reconsideration, and guess what?
Let me guess.
I'm not entitled.
Oh dear. So again, at this point, many people would just say, this is just too much hassle. I want to get on with my life. We're back in the UK. We've got a new posting, new life. Let's get on with it. That's not what happened next, though, was it?
No, I could have quite easily given up. But by this time, I was so incensed by it. I kind of thought, how many people have been through this and have just said, oh, okay, and just got on with their lives, when actually they're entitled to this we move with our husbands or partners, to different parts of the world. And yeah, when you're entitled to something, you think, well, actually.
Absolutely. And these things have been fought for and sort of they're laid out in law and stuff. So Ken then went sort of political with this, didn't he, as well?
Oh, he did. Yeah. Basically, he took it to his supervisors, who then he spoke to Will Quince MP. He was at the time, I don't know if he still is, but at the time he was the parliamentary undersecretary for DWP, and then it got raised in Parliament, and next thing I know, I receive a cheque for £960.
So it's not everything, but it's something, and you persevered with that. I'm going to ask you a question, Nikki. If it hadn't have been for the support you got from the Families Federation, do you think you would have pursued this, or is this something you'd have probably just gone, let's just move on?
No, I'd have given up. I'm not going to lie. I would have given up. Ken was just as incensed as I was, and he was like, no, this isn't right. This isn't right. We're going to fight this, and that's exactly what we did.
And presumably, okay, there was some outcome for you. It may not have been the perfect one, but there was something, and you got some sort of justice on that. There must be a feeling as well for you that you've kind of made it a little bit easier for those following you. Somebody else maybe sort of coming back from a posting, could be Akrotiri, could be Edwards Air Force Base, could be anywhere, but they hopefully won't go through what you've gone through.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what kind of strengthened my resolve, really. It was the fact that how many times has this happened to other people, and other people have just said, well, okay, that's fair enough, and just moved on with it. I thought, well, actually, no. And I wasn't working at the time as well, so I had plenty of time to spend on it.
So if somebody is listening at the moment to this podcast and thinking, well, I've got this thing, but I don't know whether the RAF Families Federation would be interested or not, what would you say to them?
Oh, they're definitely worth a call. Definitely contact them, whether it's email or, give them the call. And that if they can help, they really will help. And it made a world of difference to me.
Overseas postings can offer some fabulous opportunities, but as Richie Morgan, the Support and Outreach Manager for the RAF Families Federation, says, they can also cause some problems, particularly when it comes to things like finance and PCP finance for cars in particular. I started off by asking Richie exactly what is PCP.
Yeah, hi Chris. So a PCP finance is basically, it's called a personal contract purchase. So what that is in effect is when, and most people have got these on their vehicles, is where you put a down payment down onto a car, then pay a monthly figure over a period of time, and at the end of that period you then do a balloon payment, as they call it, and then you either own the car or you go on to another PCP agreement. So it's a little bit like a lease, but it's more of a HP agreement, as in a hire purchase agreement, I suppose.
Okay, so you've taken out the PCP arrangement, you've got the car of your dreams, and then suddenly you're posted overseas. Problem?
Yes, we've had a few problems where people have come to us before with issues on that. So I think the big thing for people to remember is that when you go enter any finance agreement with a company, you don't own the car. So the finance company own the car. You are just you hold the logbook, so to speak, on that one. So you don't own it. It's not yours. You're just the registered keeper of that particular car. The problem you've got is when you are posted overseas, those agreements don't allow you to take your car overseas on a permanent basis. With that, I mean in excess of, I think some of the companies we've had is in excess of 30 days. So if you go on a holiday, fine. But if you're posted overseas on 2 to 3 year tours, you can't take your car.
So you're driving around in your fabulous shiny new car, you've got the PCP in place, then the posting comes along, you're off to, say, Cyprus, for example, and now the fun and games can really begin, as Richie says.
Yeah, mainly the companies we've had. Cyprus is a great example, as you've given there, Chris. We've had a couple of people we've helped out successfully, and I'll go over that in a little while on those. Is that the company said, no, your agreement says you can't take your car overseas, and it's in your agreement. I suppose a top tip to people is if you're going to enter yourself into an agreement, read the small print, and that's the sort of thing we've had before with that. So they come to us, asked for our assistance, and the way we've done that, Ken, who used to work with me as part of my team, he then contacted the finance company direct. And I went in to explain that, not a normal civilian, so to speak, representing the RAF, going posted overseas, and then written up a request for them to let somebody take the car with them.
Presumably, Richie, from the PCP company and the car company's perspective, the problem is if somebody takes a car and goes overseas with it, they could, in theory, just disappear off into the ether with the car and the money.
Yeah, exactly that, and that's where the companies have come back to us and said the issue for them is that if somebody defaults on the payment, they have to recover that car from that location. And that's the main issue with it, really. So part of the agreements, people, when they said, yes, you can take your car with you, following our involvement, they then said, yeah, okay, on the understanding is that if you do default on the payments, you as the individual responsible for returning that car back to us, the financial cost of it.
So when it comes to helping people out who find themselves in this situation, what sort of success rate have you had, Richie?
We've had pretty good, I would say, with some companies. We've had one or two, unfortunately, they've turned around and said no, and I suppose the impact of that for one individual is their car sitting in the UK, they're still paying their PCP monthly agreement. They're now overseas and having to fund another car whilst overseas. We've only had a couple of those. We've been quite successful in the main, but I think the main thing is we're not always successful, but we've had a few. And one of the examples, you mentioned Cyprus there. We've got somebody who went out to Cyprus, contacted us because I'm quite happy to name it was BMW as regards to the car that he had. And his options were two. One was pay £5,000 and hand the car back, having already had that car for 17 months. So basically, he's been paying for that car for 17 months. And then they're saying, well, you still give us £5,000 and we want the car back. That was one option. And the other option to him was you can pay off your finance, completely pay off your finance, which was at the time £19,000. So the financial implication on people on that can be massive with that. As I said, the previous person we just spoke about there wasn't in a position to do that. So the car's sitting in the UK and he's still paying the money on that. And
presumably, Richie, you're then left with the problem that you arrive, say, in Cyprus again, and you've got to pay for another car while you're still paying for the one back in the UK. And even the most sort of friendly car dealer in Limassol or Larnaca is not going to give you a gizzit for 3 years.
Yes. So I say that this is the individual we were talking about there. Yeah, that's a major outcome for that individual. Fortunately for him, BMW agreed for him to take his car with him, so he's happy with that. But we've had a couple of other people as well, and another case is more recent is somebody who's currently in Italy, same position as that, and again BMW. Not that I'm a plug for BMW, but yeah, so they same there, and again we wrote to them, and they agreed again with that, and that person was fortunate to be able to take the car over to Italy with them.
And finally, Richie, for someone thinking of taking out a PCP arrangement for a new car, but who's liable to be posted, what would the advice be from the RAF Families Federation?
Yeah, there's a few things I would say. First things we say to people when we're out and about, because we do brief this when we're doing a bit of our outreach activities, is top tips, if you like. First of all, when you go into an agreement, tell the company you got the agreement with that you are a member of the armed forces and you may be posted overseas in the future. What's the impact on? So they know exactly where they stand, and you do from the outset. Then after that, read the small print. It sounds fairly obvious, but I can guarantee most people, myself included, have gone into agreements and not looked at the small print. And then when you do read it, you think, I should have checked that. So do that one as well. If you do have problems with the companies, then come to us and we'll try to help you out. And again, as I said earlier, manage people's expectations. We will try the best we can. We've got a well-established method, should we say? So we know what questions to ask and what details we require for that company as well. So we will try on your behalf, and hopefully our success rate will carry on as it has been. But the people need to be aware that it's not always a success rate. So just manage people's expectations on that side.
I'm AS1 Victoria Andrews with Reheat for Inside Air. The UK, along with 19 other NATO partners, are sending emergency response personnel to Turkey to support rescue and relief operations in areas devastated by the recent earthquake. Army medical specialists first transited into the area with a deployable medical treatment facility on a C-130J Hercules. Further specialists from 16 Medical Regiment and RAF Medical Services personnel will join the effort in providing urgent care. Their deployable facilities include an intensive care unit, surgical bay and emergency department. Ukrainian tank and artillery crews have flown to the UK on board a Voyager aircraft to undertake specialist military training. They'll be taught how to operate Challenger 2 tanks as well as AS-90 mobile artillery. 11,000 Ukrainians have been flown to the UK for training since the summer of 2022, while UK support has also consisted of large quantities of military equipment. A new world-leading synthetic training system will link simulators to a central hub, enabling operators across land, maritime and air environments to train safely and securely together. The new system, known as Gladiator, is unparalleled in Europe. The system won't replace live flying, but will complement it, enabling each training activity to be completed in the most effective environment. And finally, a project to upgrade aircraft refuelling tankers will extend their lifespan by 15 years. The Large Capacity Aircraft Refueller Life Extension Project is upgrading 80 tankers to improve deployability, availability and flexibility. The 20,000 litre capacity refuellers supply the bulk of the fuel for RAF, Royal Navy and British Army aircraft. That's Reheat on Inside Air.
I'm AS1 Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound of a de Havilland Mosquito starting up. The Mosquito is a British two-engined multi-role combat aircraft which was used by the Royal Air Force and other Allied forces during World War II. Of the 7,781 aircraft built, 30 survive today, and only 4 of which are airworthy. It started life in late 1938 as a multi-role bomber and reconnaissance aircraft. Due to its rapid success, a fighter variant was also developed. It would fly so fast and high that no defensive armaments would be needed, and the design avoided the use of strategic materials, instead using wood for almost the entire aircraft. If the Mosquito wasn't already versatile enough, in 1944 it became the first British twin-engine aircraft to land on an aircraft carrier, and it was even capable of catching and destroying V-1 flying bombs.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review, subscribe on your favourite podcast app and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.